Now, I think many of these people recognize intellectually that there's probably been times throughout church history that we've had a great deal of confusion and sin from leaders in the church and even from the Pope. But can you maybe shed some light on that? I'm sure you're familiar with this. Throughout history where there's been tremendous chaos and confusion and how the church is...
Yeah, and people say, is this the worst thing ever? Is this the worst time ever? I don't know, but we do have some unique things right now that weren't present before. We really have confusion in the church happening at the same time as an incredible array of the powers of this world against Christ and the church. It reminds me of Psalm 2, where it says the kings of the world array themselves against the Lord and his anointed. So all the levers of power now in culture today, all the levers of government, all the levers of entertainment, even sports. Yeah. How about this? Professional sports kind of becoming woke, Professional sports kind of persecuting people for not going along with the global elite agenda. Education. I mean, it's incredible how public schools have so quickly become indoctrination centers for gender confusion and homosexuality and disobeying your parents and don't telling your parents, separating parents from children. So, I mean, it's like, wow. I mean, there's a takeover about every kind of, avenue of influence in our society by something really inimical to Christ and the church. And I don't think you can explain how quick and how thorough it's been without supernatural power. And it really reminds me of something Pope Benedict said after he retired. Could I read that
Please.
to you? Yeah, it's...
because we do often kind of point to secret groups within the church, but there's also the demonic who are seeking the destruction of souls and Christ's church.
Yes, and Paul says our battle is primarily not against flesh and blood, not about political parties, not about Planned Parenthood, not about this, that, or the other thing. Those are instruments of spiritual powers that are just incredibly intelligent and incredibly hate-filled towards the human race and towards Christ. And so people, without even being aware of it, can be actually instruments of the satanic, and what's the definition of the Antichrist? Somebody who refuses to acknowledge Christ, and these movements, these organizations, these parties are opposed to the truth about Jesus. They don't mind a false Jesus. They don't mind a Jesus in a church that you can use as like a chaplain to their agenda. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little concerned that that's what the Catholic Church is being lured into. They're being lured into almost being like a chaplain to the UN or a chaplain to the global reset. But anyway, Pope Benedict said, 100 years ago, everybody would have considered it to be absurd to speak of a homosexual marriage. Today, one is being excommunicated by society if one opposes it. The same applies to abortion and to the creation of human beings in the laboratory. Latest announcement, we just kind of did a blend between a mouse fetus and mouse cells and human cells. This stuff is really, crazy stuff is really happening. Then he goes on to say, modern society is in the middle of formulating an anti-Christian creed, and if one opposes it, one is being punished by society with excommunication. The fear of the spiritual power of the Antichrist is natural, but it really needs the response of prayers on the part of an entire diocese and of the universal church in order to resist it. So, not too long ago...
Wow, that's so well put.
Yeah.
You'd think that he was responding today, not however many years ago that was.
And not too long ago to have somebody with his respect talk about the Antichrist, you'd label like, come on now, this is a little crazy, you're getting into end-time speculation, But he's saying people are beginning to sense that something big is going on that's really, really big and bad, and there's a natural fear about the spiritual power of the Antichrist, but then he says it needs to be countered by prayer, type of thing. And so, there's just so many places we could go with this, Matt, so many different directions, Ephesians chapter 6, spiritual armor, what the Catechism of the Catholic Church says about the Antichrist, there's just so many places.
It does feel like for too long we haven't recognized the demonic.
Yeah.
I remember sitting with a nun and a couple of Catholic women, and they found an old prayer book. This was back in 2003, and they were reading the St. Michael prayer and were astonished at how ridiculous it was. They had never heard of it before, and they were laughing at it and how silly it was.
Well, Archbishop Gomez just a couple days ago said something almost identical to what Pope Benedict is saying, and that's pretty amazing for the president of the Bishops' Conference, knowing that the bishops are divided, knowing that he's going to take flack for saying something like this. He said something very similar. He said that these movements of kind of global reset, and he mentions Black Lives Matter, and he mentions other things, are actually in the process of forming an alternate worldview and an alternate religion that has no place for Christ in the church.
Amen. Yes.
And he says,
God bless him.
He says we need to really be honest about this. That's what we're dealing with now. We're not dealing with a Christian culture anymore. We're dealing with an alternate religion, an alternate worldview that's coming up that we need to be really realistic about.
I'm going to make a t-shirt that says "Reject Secular Dogma." What do you think?
Thank you so much for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, do us a favor by clicking like and subscribe, and if you really liked it, consider sharing. Thanks.